For 15 long years, my child completely ignored me, until my lottery win. Then came the invitation to finally meet my grandson. My subsequent actions left him speechless. I awakened solitary on my 65th birthday, a familiar routine for the previous 15 years. My modest Portland flat seemed more deserted than typical as I quietly moved to the kitchen, brewing my daily coffee. A single, somber greeting card, from the church, rested on the counter. They were the only ones who recalled. Next to it, a picture of my son, Richard, captured 15 years earlier, his most recent image I possessed. I traced his features on the frame, recalling the small child who once needed my evening kiss to fall asleep, who would seek comfort in my bed during loud storms. How did our lives diverge so profoundly? How did I become the parent whose child acted as if she never existed? Taking on extra nursing shifts after his father departed was not an option. It was pure necessity. Each additional hour meant Richard could access the educational materials he required, the sports gear, ultimately his entire university education, which I fully financed. Yet, for him, those dedicated hours were perceived as neglect. My careful money management transformed into overbearing behavior. My advice became unwelcome meddling. The ultimate rupture occurred because of $5,000. Merely $5,000. This is an unparalleled chance, Mother. MedTech Solutions will completely transform the industry. His gaze shone with that well-known fervor. It was the identical expression he'd shown for 3 earlier guaranteed successes that had depleted his funds. I cannot, Richard. Those funds are for unexpected urgent needs, I had stated. His face solidified into an unfamiliar mask. You have consistently behaved this way, overbearing and suspicious. How can you claim to care for me yet not have faith in me? It's my money you desire, not my affection, I responded. These words I had regretted daily ever since. I reached a resolution that morning, on my birthday. No more solitary celebrations. 3 hours later, my car was outside his Seattle residence. A lovely 2-story dwelling in an area I could never have afforded with my nursing income. Through the pain, I noticed balloons. Naturally, we shared the identical birth date. My son was reaching 40 today. My hands shook as I pressed the doorbell. The cheerful sounds within instantly ceased. Steps drew nearer, then Richard, appearing prosperous in his costly jumper, his expression immediately stiffening upon seeing me. What brings you here? His words dropped like frozen fragments between us. Before I could reply, a woman materialized next to him. Vanessa. His spouse. She evaluated me with detached disapproval. Today is not convenient, Richard stated, already drawing the door shut, but not before I glimpsed a youngster darting through the main room. A boy I had never encountered. My grandson. Please, I breathed. I merely wanted to offer good wishes. You are unwelcome here. I believed I had conveyed that explicitly. The door shut firmly, leaving me isolated on the stoop, tears tracing paths down my cheeks as the festivities inside continued without interruption. 15 years of estrangement, and my own child would not grant me 5 minutes on our joint birthday. I drove back, contemplating which pain was sharper, another rejection, or realizing a child was inside, unaware of my very existence. Months passed. I tried to immerse myself in charitable work at the community library, where unorganized pages did not pass judgment or cast you aside. There, I encountered Eleanor, a refined, retired lawyer with keen eyes that observed everything. You are burdened by something significant, she commented one afternoon, joining me at the table. I recognized her perceptive look. Initially, I evaded, but something about Eleanor's direct manner penetrated my defenses. Soon, I was revealing everything to her. Richard, the separation, my birthday catastrophe. Have you attempted writing to him? She inquired. I gave a bitter chuckle. Letters, electronic messages, birthday greetings, 15 years worth, either sent back unopened or completely disregarded. Eleanor thoughtfully nodded. But have you composed the genuine message? Not what you imagine he wants to read, but the unvarnished truth. That night, I wrote by hand, until my fingers ached. I poured my entire being onto those sheets. How my controlling tendencies stemmed from the dread of losing him, just as I had lost his father. How observing him from a distance, through shared acquaintances, had been my sole link to his existence. How desperately I longed to meet my grandson. No justifications, just honesty and an apology. 3 weeks later, a large brown envelope arrived. My hands trembled as I opened it, foolish hope fluttering within. Inside were the shredded pieces of my letter, torn into jagged fragments. A small yellow sticky note simply read, "Cease attempting to enter our lives." I sat motionless, the fractured remnants of my heart scattered across my lap, mirroring the letter. In my bedroom, wardrobe was a container holding 15 years of unopened birthday gifts for a grandson who did not know me. That evening, I added the ripped letter to the collection. At the library the next day, I overheard a mutual acquaintance mention Richard had been promoted to vice president of marketing at Brightpath Industries, not MedTech Solutions, the company for which he'd sought my $5,000. A quick online search confirmed MedTech had declared bankruptcy 2 years after our falling out. My curiosity led me deeper into my online investigation. Richard's social media displayed a meticulously curated existence, a lovely family enjoying holidays in exotic locales. Beneath one beach photograph, his caption declared, "Celebrating my advancement. Who needs relatives when you possess achievement?" I closed my laptop, a peculiar tranquility settling over me. 15 years of pleading for meager crumbs of affection was enough. I would cease striving for someone who had so thoroughly erased me from his narrative. That night, I gathered all the unused cards and presents and sealed them in a storage container, not discarding them. I wasn't prepared for that, but acknowledging they belonged to a reality that would never materialize. Time to begin living for myself. I whispered to the empty room. I had no idea how profoundly that choice would alter everything. 1 year later, my life was almost unrecognizable. My small circle of companions had expanded. I joined a literary group through the library. I even attempted water aerobics at Eleanor's urging, though I still considered it merely glorified splashing. "Anything else today?" asked the cashier at Morgan's Market as I finalized my grocery payment. He gestured toward the lottery ticket display. "Jackpots up to $220 million. Everyone is purchasing tickets." I had never participated in the lottery. Too many years witnessing patients squander rent money had soured me on games of chance. But something, perhaps the milestone of enduring a full year without contacting Richard, made me pause. "Why not?" I said, handing over $2 for one ticket. The ticket remained forgotten in my handbag until 3 nights later, when I absently switched on the evening news during dinner. The announcer's voice pierced my thoughts. "Tonight's Powerball numbers are..." My hands froze mid-bite as the digits appeared on screen. Slowly, I reached for my purse, extracting the crumpled ticket. I verified it once, twice, 3 times. My heart pounded so loudly I could barely hear the announcer confirm there was a solitary winner in Portland, Oregon. I sat motionless in my chair until midnight, gazing at the ticket. $220 million. It felt unreal. It couldn't be real, yet it was. The legal professional I contacted the next day appeared equally astonished. "Miss Wilson, do you comprehend that is $128 million after taxes as a lump sum payment?" I nodded, still dazed. "Oregon permits winners to maintain some anonymity by claiming through trusts or LLCs," he explained. "The name will be publicly accessible, but we can establish something general." As he detailed the procedure, a memory emerged. Richard's expression when I had denied him that $5,000. His bitterness that I lacked confidence in his judgment. Now, here I sat, attempting to process more money than I could possibly grasp. "You have no idea how many individuals will emerge from obscurity," the attorney cautioned. "Relatives you haven't heard from in decades will suddenly recall your close bond. Family." The term lingered between us. Richard's face flashed in my mind, followed by the brief glimpse of my grandson I'd caught before the door slammed shut. A peculiar sensation settled over me. Not enthusiasm or even joy, but something sharper. For 15 years, I had been powerless, pleading for scraps of affection. Now, for the first time, I held the advantage. Establish the trust, I stated calmly. And I wish to discuss how to keep this as confidential as possible. As I departed his office, stepping into the brilliant Portland sunlight, I felt something I hadn't experienced in many years. Influence. 6 months passed while I adhered to my financial advisor's recommendations. I founded the Wilson Family Trust to accept the lottery earnings, maintaining a discreet profile. Externally, nothing changed. I still volunteered at the library, resided in my apartment, and drove my 10-year-old Honda. "You are the most disciplined lottery winner I have ever encountered," Eleanor observed over coffee. As my sole confidant, she had watched me meticulously strategize while rejecting the typical lottery winner's extravagances. "I acquired discipline raising a child on a nurse's income," I responded. "Furthermore, ostentatious spending attracts undue attention. I did permit myself one carefully considered indulgence. A modest but charming 3-bedroom residence in a tranquil Portland neighborhood. To justify the purchase to acquaintances, I casually mentioned selling ancestral land in the Midwest that had been entangled in legal disputes for years. 6 months after claiming my winnings, I was organizing books at the library when my phone vibrated with an email alert. My heart skipped a beat when I saw the sender. Richard Wilson. "Mom, it's been a while. Heard from Sarah Miller you relocated to a nicer house. Is everything all right? Perhaps we could converse sometime." 15 years of silence, and now this casual message, as if we had spoken last week. I leaned against the bookshelf, hands trembling. That evening, I researched Bright Path Industries and discovered they were embroiled in a marketing ethics scandal. Several executives were under internal scrutiny. Richard's name appeared in multiple articles. The timing felt too precise to be mere chance. Richard's sudden interest after 15 years, just as his professional life was collapsing, and right after hearing I might have acquired some money, I composed a cautious reply. "Richard, it's pleasant to hear from you. Yes, I sold some family assets and moved to a safer area. How are you and your loved ones doing?" His response arrived within minutes, warmer, more extensive, mentioning his difficult work situation and introducing my grandson. "Nathan is 12 now. He has always wished to meet his grandmother. Perhaps we could have lunch sometime. Always wanted to meet me?" The boy who didn't know I existed until Richard required something. I stared at my phone, a peculiar calm settling over me. For 15 years, I would have sacrificed anything for this invitation. Now it felt hollow, transparent. Still, there was Nathan, the innocent party in all this. A child who deserved to know his grandmother regardless of his parents' motivations. "I would adore that," I replied, even as my mind began formulating a strategy. Seattle's Harbor View restaurant was Richard's selection, sophisticated enough to impress, with expansive windows showcasing Elliott Bay. I arrived early, dressed simply but elegantly in a blue gown I had splurged on. My sole visible concession to my new wealth was my vehicle, a new Volvo SUV that I justified as safer for potential visits from a grandson. Richard, Vanessa, and Nathan arrived precisely on schedule. Richard appeared leaner than I recalled, tension etched across his attractive face. Vanessa was flawlessly refined in designer attire that couldn't quite conceal her calculating gaze. And Nathan, my heart ached at the sight of him, tall for 12, with Richard's eyes and a guarded expression that broke my heart. "Nathan," I said softly, resisting the impulse to embrace him. "I am so delighted to finally meet you." The boy glanced uncertainly at his father, before formally extending his hand. "Nice to meet you too, Mrs. Wilson. You can call me Grandma," I offered. "Or Margaret, if that's more comfortable." Richard guided us to our table, immediately dominating the discussion with tales of Nathan's academic accomplishments and athletic triumphs, all recounted as if he were presenting a curriculum vitae rather than describing a child. Throughout lunch, Richard and Vanessa probed me with inquiries about my financial gain from the family property. "It must have been substantial to afford that neighborhood," Vanessa commented, scrutinizing my modest jewelry as if assessing its worth. I diverted the conversation, focusing instead on Nathan. What subjects do you enjoy in school? His eyes brightened. Science and history. I'm currently working on a project about immigration patterns. Actually, my teacher says Nathan excels in everything, Richard interrupted. Top of his class, just like I was. I observed how Nathan's shoulders slumped slightly at the interruption. How his enthusiasm diminished. It painfully reminded me of Richard at that age when his father would disregard his achievements. When the bill arrived, Richard theatrically patted his pockets. It appears I left my wallet in my other jacket. I smiled serenely, noting the expensive timepiece still on his wrist, and settled the tab without comment. In the parking area, Richard casually mentioned, "We're experiencing a difficult period. The company is restructuring, and Nathan's private school tuition is due soon." I nodded non-committally. I'm just pleased we are reconnecting. As Richard and Vanessa bickered about something by their car, Nathan approached me hesitantly. "You don't seem ill," he stated, his voice hushed. "Ill?" He glanced nervously toward his parents. "Dad mentioned you had a brain ailment that left you confused and weak. That's why you never visited or called." My heart froze. Before I could reply, Richard sharply called for Nathan. The boy quickly took my phone, typed something, and ran back to his parents. Driving home, I checked my phone. Nathan had added his contact details with a simple message. "Can we talk sometime?" Tears blurred my vision. But they no longer stemmed from sorrow. They originated from something far more perilous. Fury. Richard increased communication in the weeks following our lunch. Each message thinly veiled references to his financial struggles. Meanwhile, I cultivated a careful relationship with Nathan through text messages, never directly refuting Richard's falsehoods, but sharing anecdotes of my active volunteer work and travels with companions. "Did you truly ascend Mount Hood last year?" Nathan texted one evening. "Dad claimed your condition made it difficult for you to even walk sometimes." "The panorama from the summit was breathtaking," I replied, attaching a photograph of myself at Timberline Lodge. "I have always enjoyed hiking." His response came swiftly. Dad must have been mistaken then. One afternoon, Nathan mentioned his upcoming history presentation. It's about immigration patterns, including how your parents arrived in America. "I wish you could attend, but it's on a Thursday next month." My heart rate quickened. I could drive up for it. "Really?" "I can add you to the visitor list. Each student receives 4 family slots." The day of the presentation, I arrived at Seattle Prep an hour early, my heart pounding as I registered at the front office. The receptionist smiled warmly. "You must be Nathan's grandmother. He's so excited you're here." In the hallway, I met Mr. Collins, Nathan's history teacher, who shook my hand enthusiastically. "Mrs. Wilson, Nathan has been telling us you might come. It's wonderful to finally meet you." "Finally?" I inquired. "Well, yes. After all these years of hearing about your condition, it's remarkable to see you doing so well. Nathan even completed an entire project on neurodegenerative diseases last year, based on your experience." The floor seemed to sway beneath me. My condition. Mr. Collins suddenly appeared uncomfortable. "The early onset dementia." Richard explained at every parent-teacher conference how you couldn't travel or manage social situations. Nathan even raised funds for research. He trailed off, observing my expression. "You didn't know." I steadied myself against the wall. Richard hadn't merely excluded me from their lives. He had fabricated an elaborate story portraying me as mentally incapacitated. While I was sending cards and letters begging for inclusion, he was informing everyone, including my own grandson, that I was too unwell to function. The presentations commenced before I could fully absorb this revelation. I sat rigidly in the back row, watching Nathan speak confidently about his family background. Facts I'd shared in my texts were skillfully woven into his narrative. When he noticed me, his face briefly brightened before he returned to his presentation. Afterward, as families mingled in the corridor, I saw Richard and Vanessa enter, surveying the crowd. Richard's face lost all color when he spotted me conversing with Mr. Collins. "What are you doing here?" he hissed, pulling me aside. "Nathan invited me," I replied calmly, though my heart pounded. "An interesting detail. Mr. Collins mentioned my condition, the dementia you've been describing to everyone for years." Richard's eyes darted around the room. "This is not the appropriate place." "No," I agreed, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. "It isn't. But we will discuss it, Richard. Soon." As I walked away, Nathan caught up to me, beaming. "You came." I hugged him, our first embrace. Over his shoulder, I caught Richard's gaze, cold and calculating. The battle lines had been drawn, and for the first time in 15 years, I was not at a disadvantage. He told everyone I had dementia. Eleanor nearly spilled her tea when I recounted the school revelation. That's monstrous." "Margaret," I nodded, the initial shock having given way to a simmering rage I barely recognized in myself. While I was sending cards and gifts, he was telling Nathan I was too sick to even comprehend who he was. Eleanor set down her cup with the precision of someone containing immense anger. "What is your next course of action?" "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me wishes to expose him, to tell Nathan everything, but that would only harm the boy. And the other part," I met her gaze steadily, "wants to understand the full extent of this deception." The next day, Eleanor connected me with Martin Reeves, a discreet private investigator whose expertise she had utilized during her legal career. "Just information gathering," she assured me. "Nothing illicit." Martin's findings surpassed my darkest suspicions. Richard was drowning in debt. A mortgage underwater, credit cards maxed out, high-interest loans. The Bright Path scandal involved marketing campaigns that overstated benefits and downplayed side effects of certain medications, with Richard's signature on the approvals. "He's facing potential termination," Martin explained. "The company is conducting internal investigations before the FDA becomes involved." Most unsettling was what Martin uncovered in Nathan's school records. Richard and Vanessa had applied for his transfer to an international school in Vancouver, Canada. The application demanded a substantial deposit and proof of Canadian residency within 30 days. They were planning to abscond using my money. Richard's pressure intensified, his hints becoming less subtle. "Nathan's school is increasing tuition," he mentioned during one call. "And with the current housing market, we might need to severely downsize." During a video chat ostensibly for Nathan to showcase his science project, Vanessa accidentally left investment brochures visible in the background, featuring property developments in Vancouver. I maintained my facade of unaware sympathy while setting my trap. I mentioned my scheduled visit to a financial advisor, adjusting my will to include Nathan, and arranged for Vanessa to accidentally glimpse significant bank statements in my purse during a brief coffee meeting, displaying only a fraction of my wealth, but enough to fully ensnare them. "This feels wrong," I whispered to Eleanor after describing my manipulations. "I'm becoming as cunning as they are." She squeezed my hand. "The difference is your ultimate goal. They intend to exploit you and vanish. You aim to protect Nathan and potentially reconstruct something genuine." That night, Nathan texted me. "Dad and Mom are arguing a lot. I heard them discussing Vancouver again. Dad says you're the solution to everything if he can just finalize the deal soon." "What does that mean?" I stared at my phone. Heartbreaking for this child caught in his parents' schemes. Whatever transpired next, Nathan deserved better. "I'm not certain, sweetheart," I replied. "But don't worry. I promise I'll always be here for you, no matter what." It was a vow I would not break. Not like the ones Richard had been making all these years. "I appreciate you making time for dinner. Just the two of us," Richard said, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. He had selected another expensive Seattle eatery, far beyond what his financial circumstances should permit. "Of course," I replied, observing my son across the table. In the soft illumination, I could still perceive the boy I had nurtured, a faint spark beneath the desperate man he had become. Richard launched into an obviously rehearsed monologue about family reconciliation, carefully constructed to tug at my emotions. "I've been too proud," he admitted with practiced humility, "clinging to old resentments when we should be uniting as a family. I nodded encouragingly, noticing how his eyes darted toward my handbag beside the table. Nathan adores you, he continued. He speaks about you constantly. Having his grandmother in his life has been so meaningful. I cherish our relationship, I stated truthfully. He's a remarkable boy. Richard leaned forward, his voice dropping. Mom, I've been meaning to discuss something important, an opportunity that could resolve several issues simultaneously. Here it comes, I thought. I'm launching a new enterprise, a consulting firm specializing in pharmaceutical marketing compliance. The irony, right? He laughed without humor. With my intimate knowledge of what to avoid, I could assist companies in navigating regulations ethically. I maintained an interested expression as he outlined his business proposal. Noting how the projected startup costs conveniently matched his current debt burden, I'm offering you a chance to invest in something significant, he concluded. Not merely a business with excellent profit potential, but in our family's future. If you assist with this startup and perhaps help with our current cash flow difficulties, I promise you'll be a permanent part of Nathan's life. My son was literally trading access to my grandson. You're not requesting charity. I echoed his words back to him. You're proposing a partnership in business and family. He nodded eagerly. Exactly. And we'd be nearby. Well, relatively nearby. Oh, Vancouver has a burgeoning biotech sector. Nathan is already on the waiting list for Cambridge International Academy there. It's very exclusive. Only accepts 50 students per grade. We need to secure his place with a deposit by next week. I took a sip of water, gaining time. Vancouver, British Columbia. That's quite a relocation. A fresh beginning, he said smoothly. For all of us. You could visit any time. Just as Martin had uncovered, they were planning to take my money and flee across the border. I'll need time to consider it, I said carefully. Richard's smile tightened. Don't delay too long. These opportunities have deadlines. That night, a text from Nathan appeared. Grandma, I overheard Mom and Dad arguing after you left. Dad said they need to finalize the deal with the old lady before she changes her mind. I think they meant you. They're talking about moving to Canada. But they haven't told me anything. Please don't tell them I said this. I sat in the darkness of my bedroom, a strange calm settling over me. For 15 years, I had grieved the loss of my bond with Richard. Now I grieved something different. The man I had believed my son to be. It was time to end this pretense. I'm so pleased you could all come for the weekend, I said, welcoming Richard, Vanessa, and Nathan into my Portland residence. I had suggested they visit to discuss my investment decision. Bait they couldn't resist. My new house was comfortable, but not extravagant, a deliberate choice to maintain my cover story. Still, I noticed Vanessa's eyes cataloging every item, mentally calculating values. Beautiful place, Mother, Richard said, his gaze lingering on the original artwork in my entryway. Quite an improvement from your apartment. The family property sale worked out well, I replied vaguely. Nathan, would you like to see the room I prepared for you? There's a telescope on the balcony. We have a clear view of Mount Hood on good days. Throughout the weekend, I observed Richard and Vanessa closely. They performed the roles of loving parents when they thought I was watching, but in unguarded moments, their impatience with Nathan was evident. They interrupted his narratives, dismissed his interests, and exchanged irritated glances when he posed questions. When alone with me, Nathan visibly relaxed, his nervous stammer vanishing, his passion for science and history emerging in animated discussions. He reminded me so much of Richard at that age, before the bitterness took root. Saturday afternoon, while Richard and Vanessa went for a walk, truly a strategy session, I suspected, Nathan showed me a brochure he'd found in his father's briefcase. Cambridge International Academy, he said, pointing to photos of an imposing building in Vancouver. Dad's briefcase was open and I saw it. I don't want to go there, Grandma. All my friends are in Seattle, and I just found you. I hugged him tightly. Whatever happens, we won't lose contact again, I promise. That evening, I prepared a special dinner. I'd spent the day cooking Richard's childhood favorites, pot roast with carrots and potatoes, warm rolls, and apple pie for dessert. As we sat down, Richard and Vanessa exchanged knowing glances. They believed this nostalgic meal signaled my surrender. After dinner, I invited everyone to the living room. "I have something important to share," I announced, watching Richard and Vanessa lean forward eagerly. 15 years ago, Richard, you exited my life over money. $5,000 I wouldn't lend you. Today, it appears money is the sole reason bringing you back. Richard's smile faltered. "Mom, that's unfair." I raised my hand, silencing him. I engaged a private investigator. The color drained from Richard's face as I placed a folder on the coffee table. He documented everything. The fabrications about my dementia, your financial woes, the Vancouver schemes you're concealing from Nathan, and the Bright Path inquiry. I understand why you suddenly remembered you had a mother after 15 years. Vanessa abruptly stood. "This is outrageous. You spied on us." "I protected myself," I corrected calmly. "And Nathan." Richard's shock gave way to anger. "So this entire reconciliation was merely a trap? You're no better than you claim we are." "The distinction," I said quietly, "is that I genuinely desired to know my grandson. You simply wanted my funds." Nathan's voice broke through the tension. "Is it true, Dad? About Grandma's illness? About Vancouver?" The silence that followed provided all the confirmation he required. The next morning, after a night of painful disclosures, we reconvened in my living room. Richard looked exhausted, Vanessa was tense, and Nathan, my heart ached for him, wore the bewildered expression of a child whose world had shifted underfoot. "I have a proposition," I stated, placing a large envelope on the coffee table. Richard eyed it suspiciously. "More investigator reports?" "No." "A potential resolution." I clearly outlined my terms. I would settle their mortgage and establish an educational trust for Nathan, with specific conditions. They must remain in Seattle. Nathan would spend 1 weekend a month with me. Richard would confront the Bright Path situation honestly, instead of fleeing. And most importantly, all of us, including myself, would attend family counseling. "You're bribing us," Vanessa declared flatly. "I'm offering a way forward," I corrected. "Not just throwing money at the problem and hoping it vanishes, which was your intention." "Wasn't it?" Richard's face flushed with anger. "You have no right to dictate our lives." "No, I don't." I agreed. "You're free to decline. Continue with your Vancouver plans if you can finance them. Attempt to evade the Bright Path investigation. But Nathan remains in my life regardless." "You can't." "I can petition for grandparent visitation rights," I interrupted, "especially given the documented pattern of deception you've maintained." "Eleanor has already prepared the necessary paperwork. This was a calculated risk. Grandparent rights were challenging to enforce, but Richard didn't know that." "You're blackmailing us," he said, his voice trembling. "I'm offering you a chance to rebuild something authentic," I replied. "Not based on falsehoods or finances, but on honesty. It won't be easy. Trust has been fractured on all sides, but Nathan deserves better than what any of us have given him thus far." Vanessa, ever practical, examined the financial details in the envelope. We required time to discuss this. Nathan, who had been silent throughout, finally spoke. "Why did you lie about Grandma all these years?" he asked his father. "Why did you tell everyone she was sick?" Richard wouldn't meet his son's gaze. "It was complicated, Nathan." "No, it wasn't," Nathan insisted, a new resolve in his voice. "You lied because it was simpler than admitting the truth. That you didn't want me to know her." In that moment, I witnessed something transform in my grandson. A recognition of adult fallibility that arrives too early for some children. He looked at his father, not with anger, but with disappointment. Perhaps the most painful emotion a parent can see in their child's eyes. "I think Grandma's proposal is sound," Nathan said quietly. "I want to try therapy. I want to remain in Seattle with my friends, and I want her in my life." Richard looked at his son as if seeing him for the first time, not as an extension of himself or a pawn in his life's game, but as a distinct individual with his own thoughts and emotions. "Nathan," he began, but seemed unable to continue. Vanessa reached for the documents, her pragmatic nature asserting itself. "We'll review these terms," she stated tightly. As they prepared to depart that afternoon, Nathan embraced me fiercely. "I'll see you in 2 weeks," he whispered. "No matter what they decide." It wasn't a question, but a declaration. The first assertion of independence from a boy becoming his own person. And in that moment, despite everything, I felt a spark of hope. 18 months later, I adjusted the birthday streamers in Richard's Seattle garden. Today we are celebrating 3 occasions: my 67th birthday, Richard's 42nd, and Nathan's middle school graduation. The gathering is intimate, just family. Eleanor, who drove up with me, and a few of Nathan's companions. The path to this day was not smooth. Richard initially accepted my conditions more out of necessity than genuine desire. He cooperated with BrightPath's investigation, agreeing to a significant demotion rather than termination. Vanessa briefly considered divorce, but eventually acknowledged her own role in their difficulties, her status-seeking and willingness to overlook dubious choices to maintain their lifestyle. Our therapy sessions uncovered painful truths. Richard's resentment over my long working hours when he was young, my fear of abandonment after his father left, Vanessa's insecurities stemming from her own dysfunctional family. We unearthed layers of hurt that had been festering for decades. The first 6 months were the most challenging. Richard would become emotionally withdrawn during sessions. Vanessa alternated between cooperation and passive aggression. I confronted my own guilt about guiding Richard too restrictively in his youth. Nathan, caught in the middle, gradually found his voice, compelling us adults to recognize how our actions impacted him. Nathan's monthly visits to Portland became cherished time, initially accompanied by either Richard or Vanessa, later on his own once he turned 14. These visits offered respite from the tension that often lingered at home and created space for honest conversations away from the pressures of daily life. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, things began to shift. Richard, confronted with the repercussions of his choices and observing how Nathan thrived with me in his life, started lowering his defenses. During one particularly difficult session, he finally admitted the truth behind his elaborate falsehood about my condition. "It was simpler to say you were ill than to confess I excluded you because of pride." And then I was trapped in the lie for years. Now, watching Nathan show Richard his science fair project on the patio, something unimaginable a year ago, I feel Vanessa approach with 2 glasses of lemonade. "He still struggles to articulate it," she says, nodding toward Richard. "But things are changing. He spoke about you yesterday. Positive memories he had forgotten. None of us gets it perfectly right all the time." Later, after everyone departs, Nathan presents me with his gift, a photo album he's created throughout the year, blending old pictures of Richard and me with new ones of all of us together. On the final page is a recent photograph of the 4 of us with a simple caption, "Family, imperfect, but ours." I realized then that my true triumph wasn't the lottery, which remains a secret I never fully disclosed. Though Richard and Vanessa occasionally speculate about the actual origin of my funds, my victory was rediscovering that family isn't constructed on flawlessness, but perseverance. Not with money, but with devotion. Not with vengeance, but with the courage to face difficult realities and start anew, even when it appears impossible. That night, in my hotel room, I finally opened the container where I'd kept the torn fragments of my letter and the never-delivered gifts. I selected a few items to preserve as mementos of the journey, not as symbols of bitterness, but as markers of a challenging path that ultimately led somewhere better. The past cannot be erased, but the future is still being written, one day at a time. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice truly matters.